and a brief introduction to myself. I'm a professor at Brown University. I'm a computer scientist by training. I've been one all my life. But I've also worked broadly in the public sphere thinking about AI. I've worked at the city-state level, but I spent a year and a half in the Biden administration in the White House working on AI policy, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. Okay? All right, so let's talk about AI. So I'm going to do a very quick poll. I'm a professor, so I ask questions and you're supposed to answer me. So if I had to ask you what comes to mind when you think of AI, or what you think AI is, what would you say? You can put up your hand. Yeah, go ahead. It's a tool. Sorry? Great promise. A tool with great promise. Sorry? Iterative learning. Very good. A potential reproduction of the human mind. Excellent. Yes. Hell. Ooh. HAL, the 2001 Space Odyssey. Oh, that's also hell though. So if it's hell, good one. Yes, in the back. Ethical. Okay. That it is, or it is that what you're saying? It's a question. Okay. Yes. Reflection of its programmers. This is great. This is fantastic. I don't have to give my talk. I can just like, yes. Sorry, concern for learning institutions, very much so. We spend a lot of time panicking about AI at Brown. It gives great metaphors. That is true. That is true. Now, how many of you would say in the last week you have used or interacted with AI? The question is, how many of you in the last week have used or interacted with AI as far as you can tell? Few hands going up, yeah? Okay, this last one, I'm going to tell you you're all wrong. You've all interacted with it probably even today, and you don't even realize it. You've all interacted with AI even today, and you probably don't even realize it. For those of you who didn't put their hands up when I asked the question. So, okay. What is AI? So AI is many things. If you asked a professor at a university who teaches computer science, they would say something like this. AI is it's about the design of automated systems that can sense environments, learn from inputs, and make logical inferences. That first picture there is of a robot developed by a company called Boston Dynamics. It's made to look like a cute dog. If you go to the Museum of Science in Boston, they have a little exhibit where it has a little place where it sleeps and where it goes and eats, and kids come and watch it. It's called the Boston Dynamics dog. It's a robot. But it can sense environments and navigate an environment. If you've ever used Google translate from one language to another, again, you're using a learning system that's learning from inputs and trying to help you translate into different languages. And if you ever, that picture at the bottom is of a car. It's called this is the Waymo car. It's a self-driving car that basically has all these cameras in it and can just drive you around with no driver. All of these things are examples of the use of AI because they all involve sensing environments, learning from inputs, and making logical inferences. And that's what a professor would tell you AI is all about. The parts of AI that are probably most interesting and commonly used right now is a subcategory of AI. It's a thing inside it called machine learning. And what machine learning is, it's the same thing. It's an automated system. But what it does is collects tons of data about people and then makes predictions about people and systems. Makes predictions about people. So for example, when you are going on, I don't know, Netflix and asking for a recommendation for something to watch, machine learning, which has collected data about what you've watched in the past, is going to make a prediction. A prediction for you is like, oh, you might like this show, or you might like that show. Pretty much, I would say 99% of every kind of AI we see nowadays is in fact machine learning, collecting lots of data and then finding patterns in data. There's a particular flavor of deep learning machine learning that you probably have not heard about. It's called deep learning. The word deep doesn't mean it's smarter. It just means it uses a lot more machines to do machine learning. One of the reasons why NVIDIA stock is so high is because everyone wants to buy chips to do deep learning for AI, and there are not enough chips out there. So the thing that's for the last maybe, I don't know, 10 years has been the biggest innovation in our AI has been deep learning using lots and lots of machines and tons of data to make those same predictions that I was just talking about. And of course, the thing that people are talking about today, if they think about AI, is this thing called generative AI, which is a mouthful, but really is things like ChatGPT or image generation, ChatGPT. I'll tell you all about that in a second. Systems that can, you can type a prompt into it, it'll give you an answer. The thing that generated the introduction for me that Dale used, that's using one of these systems here. It's all based on algorithms. That's right. Yes. That can absolutely happen and absolutely does happen. And that's something that, we'll talk about. Yes? No. AI has nothing to do with quantum supremacy. Yeah. Oh, the question, I'm sorry. The question was, does AI have, is it a subtext of quantum supremacy? Quantum computing is a whole other field. It's a fascinating topic. I am about this much qualified to talk about it, enough to be dangerous, but not enough to actually know anything. Kind of like ChatGPT. I could give you answers and sound very confident, but I don't know what I'm talking about. But it's very different from AI. Very different. They're like this and that. No connection to each other.
Somebody help me here.
Okay. As I said, AI gets used everywhere, whether you see it or not. So this is just a picture. This is my own recommendations for me. I'm on Twitter or X. It recommends people I should follow. Again, using machine learning to decide based on things I post, based on things others post, based on who I follow, based on who the people I follow, who I should be following. That's on X. When I go to Spotify, it makes special playlists for me based on music I've listened to. The problem is my son uses my account, so it actually is making playlists based on what he listens to, which is very different from what I listen to. But, Spotify doesn't know that. You go to Amazon. I'm sure you all use Amazon all the time. It'll have recommendations for you. Gift ideas based on your shopping history. Why I would want to give a surge protector as a gift, I don't know. But Amazon thinks that might be a good idea for a gift for someone because I bought surge protectors in the past. I use Netflix. I was back in India visiting my mother, watching some stuff there. So it's giving me a bunch of recommendations for things in Hindi to watch on Netflix. I'm on LinkedIn, and it recommends people I should follow there. All of this right now is using AI. It's using machine learning to make predictions about people I should follow, information I should have, and so on. And so this has been going on for a very long time, right? I mean, all these things have been around forever. Well, forever. 10 years. In the world of AI, that's forever. AI is also being used to make decisions about people. And this is perhaps something that not everyone knows about. In virtually every sector where people are affected or impacted, AI is being used to make those decisions. So for example, in education, helping decide who is going to do well in college, who should be admitted, what kind of intervention programs there should be if there's a worry that someone's going to drop out early. These are using AI to make predictions about who to focus on. In the case of housing, who should be given a loan to buy a house? What is the value of property, doing property appraisals? What's rent should be charged to tenants applying for rentals? All of this now is using some form of AI. Again, it's not a hypothetical. This is all happening. It's happening somewhat invisibly as well. I can go on hiring. People go through these automatic filters, resume screen. So when you apply for a job, you submit your resume. It goes through some AI filter to pick out interesting keywords and then use that to decide whether you should be moved on to the next level. The next level, you're supposed to do an interview. You might be asked to play some games, and the games will be used to score you based on AI. That'll decide whether you go on to the next level. You might do a video interview. That video interview will be analyzed using AI for your facial expressions and patterns, and that might be used to decide whether you're a good candidate for the job. Credit, whether you should get credit, get a credit card. A lot of AI systems are being used to basically build profiles of people that go beyond just your credit score. I can go on. Medical care is another big one. Deciding what kind of medical care, how much you get, how much coverage you should get, whether you get admitted, what kind of diagnostics tests, how to interpret the diagnostic tests. I could go on. There's a ton of stuff happening in the medical world. And even things like, policing and the criminal justice system, whether someone gets a bail or they don't get bail, what sentence they get, for how long, whether they get parole. all of that is being controlled in part by AI right now, and including things like benefits programs. So that's what I call AI used for decision making or decision assistance, making decisions about people. And of course, finally, there's this whole topic of content generation, right? The new stuff we talk about, where you use something like ChatGPT to generate an introduction for a speaker, or you use Google Gemini, which got into a lot of trouble yesterday, or you use other companies. There's a company called Anthropic, which makes a bot called Claude, which I'll show it to you in a second. There is Meta, which is Facebook, makes their own chatbot called Llama, hence the llamas, which again you can interact with. If you any of you use WhatsApp? Yes, I will talk about this in a second. Thank you. Who uses WhatsApp here? Okay, everyone uses WhatsApp. I don't know if you know this, but WhatsApp has essentially, because WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, they have their own Meta AI that you can interact with, you can ask questions to, and you can type in WhatsApp, it'll give you answers. So that's, for example, what Meta is doing. So that's for text, and you can have you can have these interact with these systems, and they will generate text for you. You can also generate images. So OpenAI developed this program called DALL-E, after the painter DALL-E, but it's DAL dash the letter E. And you can use that, and I'll show you how to use that. You can use that to generate images. There are other companies doing this as well. There's one called Stability.ai. There's one called Midjourney. There's a bunch of other companies. These are just some of the more well-known ones. And now you can generate video. OpenAI last week came out with a tool where you can give it a text description, and you say, I would like a video of people playing tennis on a sunny clay court. It'll generate a 30-second video of two people playing tennis on a sunny clay court. Right? It's not available to the general public yet. It's being tested out, but they have some demos that look, quite impressive. And this is definitely the future. It's not conceptually hard to go from text and images to video. It just takes more data, more training, more GPUs, more chips to do that. So AI is used for recommendations. AI is used for decision making. AI is used for content generation. It's used in all these places. And I guess one question one might have is, another one I should mention, AI is being used for science as well. So for example, there are these things called brain-computer interfaces where you can put devices in the brain that pick up signals from the brain and then use technology, algorithms, and AI to interpret those signals to understand maybe if someone is trying to move their arm, right? Pardon me? Correct. He's one of the people, in Neuralink. He's doing that as well. So there's a lot of people working on that. There's a bunch of, the FDA has approved a bunch of medical devices that use AI. I think the most recent analysis, they put out something like over 520 approvals and 396 in radiology alone. Cardiology is the next one after that, which is about 85 or so. There's a lot of interest in using AI in the natural sciences and physics and chemistry and engineering to help design better materials, to come up with new drug targets, to understand the nature of the universe. You collect lots of data from, say, observing black holes. It's hard to interpret. Can we use AI to do that? So AI in the science, I just came from the national meeting of the AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and half the panels were about the use of AI in science. So that's another very important area where AI is being used right now. Yes? I don't know. Well, if you're using robots, robotics is AI, so absolutely. Okay. So,
they could extract the hydrogen from the ice on the moon landing today, and they can make oxygen out of that. This is so profound because that means today, for the first time, we could actually have life on the moon because they can make oxygen now up there.
Yep. So how does, I'm not going to try and explain all of how AI works, but it's helpful to understand a little bit about it. And I think the basic concept, I think it's good to understand is what AI does is it finds patterns and uses them to predict things. So imagine that I'm trying to, I watch a lot of movies. I tend to watch a lot of sci-fi movies. So I've watched every single movie in the Marvel canon maybe multiple times over. So Netflix knows, or Disney Plus knows, that I watch a lot of sci-fi. So when Disney Plus wants to recommend a new sci-fi movie to me, they're going to say, okay, this guy watches a lot of sci-fi, but there are tons of sci-fi movies. What should we recommend? So they look at what other people who watch the same movies as me might be watching that I didn't watch. So these other 3 people all watch Marvel movies, but they watch this other weird movie about a psychotic rubber tire. This is a real movie, by the way. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's a real movie, and I have watched it. It's called Rubber. It's about a tire that goes alive and starts killing people. And I said, oh, maybe you might like to watch this movie because you watch a lot of sci-fi. And it did it because some of those other people who watched the same movies I did happened to watch this. Now, I could go blame them for that, but that's a different story. It found a pattern, and it predicted something. That's what AI does. It finds patterns, and it predicts based on patterns. So that's just for me. And that this same principle works for your Amazon recommendations, for Spotify, for Netflix, for anything you want. Anywhere you're being recommended something to watch or something to see, it's coming from the fact that the system is watching what other people do that look like you or that seem to be similar to you in some way, and then based on that. The same thing happens when you use AI for decision making. So this is a cartoon rendering of what it looks like. I was telling Dale yesterday, all of AI at some level is geometry, and it's sort of high dimensional geometry. So you have to kind of close your eyes, imagine a space with 100 dimensions in it. I find wine helps, but that's a different story. But the way AI works in these settings is that if I want to decide who should get a loan, I collect a lot of information of people who've got loans in the past, and maybe I'm worried about who will default on their loan. So I get a bunch of information about you, and I say, did you default or not? Check, cross. I get a bunch of information on you. Did you default, yes or no? And I get a ton of information for a ton of people. So I have, like, say, 100,000 data points. And they can be marked as this person defaulted, this person didn't. This person defaulted, this person didn't. So I mark them with that yes or no answer. And then I ask, find me a pattern that can help me distinguish, based on the data, those who will default or those who did default from those who did not default. So maybe that pattern looks like that weird line there, separating those who didn't default with a check mark from those who did with a check mark, with a cross mark there. And now a new person comes along and wants a loan. I look at their data, and I use this pattern I found to predict the chance that they will default or not. And then I make a decision. Yeah.
I think that gets us into an interesting problem with loans. Would be a great example. So there are laws where you can't discriminate against handicapped people, minorities, whatever, Indians, whatever. So how do you reconcile those restrictions with the basic data set, which says, all right, maybe handicapped people are more likely to default on a loan?
So this is an ongoing debate right now. So you're absolutely right that if you collect a bunch of data, and the data, you ask your system to find a pattern, and to find a patterns that excludes all people with disabilities from getting a loan, this would run afoul of civil rights law. And so one of the things that I teach in my class that I'm teaching right now is, how can you build systems that incorporate these considerations, these legal considerations, into the design of that pattern itself? So that the pattern, as far as possible, tries to avoid these kinds of discriminatory outcomes, or that there is a way to modify the results of the process, or to collect data and train in a particular way, so you mitigate this effect as much as possible. On the legal side, this is something that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Department of Justice, the Federal Trade Commission, and the other regulatory entities that deal with this are thinking about literally right now, putting out guidelines about this, trying to think through this. And it's not just in loans. As you can imagine, it's everywhere, whether it's medical care, whether it's benefits, whether it's employment. All these issues are coming up right now. So this is something that technically we're trying to deal with at the level of how we design these systems, but we're also trying to adapt the laws to get updated, because they really aren't designed for this world we live in now with data. Because there's no one explicitly discriminating. It's just finding patterns in the data. There's a question in the back there.
Following up on that, when you get a recommendation, when an AI system gives you a recommendation, are there some, the ones I've seen have not, are there some where you can then ask it why?
so that it actually has to tell you the criteria that it used?
That's a fantastic question. And it touches on a whole area of computer science that has grown up in the last 5 years called explainability. People in the past, maybe, I don't know, 2010, 2011, no one was asking, should we know why the system made a decision? Once it started being used in places that were consequential, people said, wait a second. If I'm going to diagnose a patient based on what this algorithm is telling me, I kind of need to know why it's saying that. And so there's a whole area of computer science now just saying, okay, I build this very complicated pattern matching system that gives me an answer. Can I go probe it to say, okay, what is it about this person's information that made the system say this? We're not there yet. We're getting there. It's lots of questions. This is great. Fantastic. Sorry, one second. We'll do the question. We'll come next. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
This is probably very basic, but whoever or whatever inputs one's information, could they do so with making an error, making that person fall into a no loan, do not hire, do not admit to college category, when in fact they should have been in the other category based on an input error?
This is not hypothetical. This has actually happened.
I'm sure it has.
It has. It happened. One context in which I do remember it happening is in the context of police work. Police entering information about someone into a system that is then deciding whether the person should get bail or should be released or not released from jail prior to trial. Information was entered in incorrectly, sometimes accidentally, sometimes not accidentally, and that led to consequences for people. So yes. That's a great question. When I come to talking about the AI Bill of Rights, all the things you're bringing up right now are things that were in that document. So I'm really glad you're bringing that up. I'll take, yeah.
Yeah, so my question was, so you design the system to give you the perfect answers, but then you're not going to use those because you've got all these exceptions that you're going to have to build into it. So why do it in the first place?
Because of what you just said. You've designed the system to give you the perfect answers. I didn't say they were perfect answers. We don't, that's a problem. When we build one of these pattern matching systems, we choose what data to collect from people. We choose what we label as good outcomes or not good outcomes. And it turns out that the way we choose to collect data and the way we choose to label the data introduces all kinds of imperfections that suggest that maybe we aren't getting the perfect outcome. And so some of the work involved in better design is to think carefully about what data you're collecting, how you're collecting it, does that data have its own problems? Should we be trying to clean up the data somehow before we build? And so when I was talking about how we are teaching students to try and build better systems, one of the places where we tell them is look at your data very carefully before you put it into the system, because as you pointed out, these systems are very, very, very dependent on what you put into them. There's a garbage in, garbage out problem. And unfortunately, in a lot of these settings, there's a lot of garbage going in. So that, yeah.
You talk about collecting data. Is the underpinning of artificial intelligence someone writing code, doing a software program, and is that the basic foundation that it's built on? And then who is writing that code, and what is their basis for doing it?
It is and it isn't. At the base of all of this are people writing code. However, they are writing a program that will itself write a program. What machine learning is, when I write code to do machine learning, my output of that program is the program. In the sense that the thing I write code to produce is the pattern. The pattern itself is another program. And so we're writing programs to generate programs, and those are what's running. So the control that we have, to the extent that we have control, is how we find that pattern. There's sometimes when I liken it to sort of throwing a ball into a roulette wheel and seeing where it lands. And where it lands is the program. It feels a lot like that with machine learning. It's quite random in that sense. Because we put in a bunch of data and we say, go find a good solution, or what we hope is a perfect solution. The system chugs away with the code we've written and produces some pattern, and then we take it. Well, one second. I think we need the microphone. Yeah.
How do you get out of the system?
Oh, sorry. So who's the mic? Okay, one second. Yeah.
Last week, we heard a lecture from the guy from Microsoft that developed Copilot.
Yep.
Can you explain which of these tools do you use? It gets to be confusion. What's the difference between Copilot and Google Search and any of the other engines that are out there, and what's the most practical to use?
So Google Search is Google Search, and I'll show you an example of Google Search augmented with generative AI. Things like Copilot are designed to be Copilots for specific tasks. For example, for writing code. If you're writing some code and you want some help, you can use Copilot to help you in different tasks. You can use Copilot to help you generate a presentation from a document, for example, or at least that's what the demos will say, and so on. So there are different AI tools being developed to help you with different kinds of tasks. Just now, like literally an hour ago, one of my friends sent me a link on WhatsApp to a new tool that Google announced, which will help you write content for the web. So you're a content generator on the web, and you need some help writing content that'll work. This AI tool will help you. So there's a lot of tiny little AI tools that are all coming out right now to help you do specific tasks, in addition to things like ChatGPT, which I'll show you, which are just, I would say, at this point, recreational and fun to play with. I'm going to go on for a little bit more, and then I will take some more questions on that, because I just want to get to a few more points, and then we can continue talking. Yeah. The last thing, and this is a good segue, because I want to tell you a little bit about how something like ChatGPT works, right? So when you type something into a chatbot and it gives you an answer, and you type a prompt and saying, give me an introduction for an AI expert, it gives you an answer, it is also finding patterns and predicting. And at some level, all it's doing is figure out the next word after this prompt. So the word is cat, and you give it a system and say, okay, what comes next? And it thinks and says, okay, it could be any of these things. The cat ran, the cat ate, the cat is. Because of the way it's been trained, there are probabilities, numbers associated with each of these things. It's like, okay, the most likely thing that's going to come next is. So then it says, okay, what happens after that? Oh, the cat, it could be the cat is hungry, the cat is hissing, the cat is chatting, and it keeps going on after that. If you try to train a chatbot with information that never said the word cat in it ever, only about dogs, it would not know what to do with the cat. Or it would try to pretend it's a dog. And it would complete as if it thought it was a dog. But that's how all these systems work. I mean, they're really fantastic, so I'm oversimplifying a lot. But at the most basic level, what they're trying to do is predict the next word in this sentence and then give you the whole thing. And that's why sometimes they get really right and sometimes they're hilariously wrong. So pattern finding and predicting is how all of AI works in all of its different contexts. Let's try it out. I'm going to do a little demo. I don't know if I can take this. Can I take it? Okay. So I was inspired by Dale's example last night when you mentioned you were using AI to introduce me. I said, let me use AI to write my own bio. I mean, because at this, at least I can check. I can say, okay, I think I know all the things I've done. So let's see what a chatbot says. So I'm going to show you 3 different versions of my bio from 3 different systems. And then I'll tell you what they got right and what they did. Right? Okay. So the first one we're going to use is, and I'm going to blow this up so we have, make sure the, I tried this last time, I'm going to try it again. This is not very big. I'm going to make it big. That's good? Yeah. Visible? Okay. So I'm going to say, nothing fancy, just that. If you can't see the bottom, I just said, write a bio for me, for Suresh Venkatasubramanian. Okay, and this is ChatGPT, the latest version. It's called ChatGPT 4. Okay, that's the thing on top there. There's a reason I'm saying that, because I want to show you an older version as well. So I click on this. It thinks for a bit. Well, I'm glad it thinks I'm prominent, which is good. Also, I'm going to scroll back up the top so we can look at it. We'll evaluate it. Okay, now I'm embarrassed. Okay, so let me scroll back up to the top, and we'll see if it got it right. I mean, everything nice is said about me is obviously right, but you know. Okay. So let's look at this first part. I'll let other people decide if I'm prominent, but I'm definitely a computer scientist. I have made contributions to these fields of algorithmic fairness. That's a technical term for the work I do right now. Computational geometry is another area I worked in when I was doing my PhD. It's a more mathematical area of computer science and data science. This is correct. I went to the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur. I didn't get a Bachelor of Technology, but that's okay. It's more or less the same thing. I did go to Stanford, and these were, in fact, my PhD advisors. That is correct. So that's good. I went to AT&T Labs. I worked there for many years, and I did work at the University of Utah, where I did get this award. As I mentioned, I did go to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, advising on these issues. And I am now a professor at Brown. This is pretty good. And then some more things about my awards and stuff. All of this is correct. So ChatGPT 4 gets an A for effort, an A for accuracy from me. I can use older versions of the chatbot. So I can use the one that came like maybe a few months before, which is GPT 3.5. And I'll ask it the same exact thing. Much faster. I think, I'm going to speculate. I'm not sure. The way these systems work, they work better the more, so when I said the cat, and I asked it to complete, it's like, well, the cat, I don't know what to say. But if I'd given a whole paragraph of information about my cat earlier and then said the cat, it would be a lot easier to figure out what needs to happen next, right? If I give you context. As these systems are getting more powerful, they're using more and more historical context to try and figure out what comes next. That takes more work, takes more GPU power, takes more computation, takes more time. That's my theory. I don't know, but that's what I think is happening. So once again, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if I was born with an innate curiosity for solving complex problems. There's a very weird stylistic difference. It's much more poetic and grand, which is not, embarking on a journey. The first thing that got wrong, though, is this. I did not go to the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. I went to the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. And if you know anything about these places, we have blood feuds. You do not make that mistake. No, 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 no. I would never go to that horrible place. Similarly, I did not go to Berkeley. I went to Stanford. And as if you probably know, you don't mix up Stanford and Berkeley. These are very different places. So they've already pissed me off twice now. Then I did not go to the University of Edinburgh. I have a cousin who works there, but he's only been working there for 2 months, so I don't know how the system knew that. So I have no connection to them. I did not co-found the Center for the Science of Social Systems. I don't even know what that is. I did not found the Initiative for Algorithmic Justice, although that's a good idea. Let's see, what else? Blah, blah, blah. I did not get the SIG KDD Service Award, but I'm happy to receive it if someone wants to give it to me. It is true. But notice it didn't mention any of my more recent work. It doesn't mention I'm at Brown. It is incorrect in many ways. So the question is, why is it incorrect? Where did it get false information? And I will put it to you that both of these questions are the wrong question. The correct question is, why was the first one correct? Chatbots are not designed to be factually accurate. They are designed to complete the sentence. As long as they complete the sentence in a way that's plausible, they have done the right thing. The fact that the first one is correct is the question you should be like, how did they get it correct? It is not, and in fact, there's a whole term for this. It's called hallucinations, where chatbots just make up stuff. So I think of a chatbot like when my kid was 3 years old, he would march up and make very confident pronouncements that were completely wrong, and he was very sure they were right. I think of a chatbot like that. It makes very confident pronouncements. They're often completely wrong, but sometimes they're right too. But you can't really tell you can't ask the system, are you sure? If you try to argue with it, it'll say, it gets a little confused. I've done this before. So that's why I showed you this one, which was 3.5, which was the older one, and 4, which is the newer one, which got better. We don't know how it got better because OpenAI won't tell us, but it got better somehow. Yes.
All this data about you is online.
So the question is, how much data about me is online?
No, when in the chat, through the older version or the younger version, this is all, the chat box is generating all this information from information that is already online.
So yeah, so all chatbots, and this is actually a source of controversy right now, most of these chatbots are trained on data from all over the web, and it's unclear what information is being taken and what's not being taken. There's the term here, the arcane term is transparency. We don't know how these systems are being trained, and since all of you have pointed out that the data coming in can affect what it produces, we kind of need to know what data is being used, but we don't. So it's quite possible that I don't think the data being used has changed from 3.5 to 4. I think the way of training and the way it's being, and like I said, the context window and how it's being, basically being trained has changed. And that's probably why it might be a little bit better. But again, like I said, these are not designed to be factually accurate in any sense of the word. They're not search, the way search engines are. Let me just go on for one more. I want to show you one more thing. Just because oh, well, we'll see about that. So you might get lucky, you might not. We'll see if this loads up or not. I was going to show you another chatbot which gave hilariously wrong answers in a different way. This is from Anthropic. It's called Claude. Okay, this may not be working. In the meantime, though, I want to show you another thing. Let me see if I can find it here. Ah, there you go. One of the things that's happening right now, where you may not even realize, again, I'll try to make this bigger so you can see this. Okay, so someone tell me something you want to search for.
Yes. How do you have one AI check on the other without legal problems if they are using your biography and they make a mistake? They make a mistake on that, and you're going to use it as evidence in a court. How responsible are they? Who is responsible? And which AI is the one that they wind up with?
Good question. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to first ask Google to answer that question for me using generative AI, and I'm going to answer it myself. Okay? So let's try it. So I'm going to paraphrase your question to say, how do we check if AI is correct? So this may not work. Like all of them, sometimes they work. So this one means it's not. Yeah, the Wi-Fi seems to be slow. Okay, but let me answer your question directly. So the answer I would give is we don't have an answer to that. We don't know how to check. In fact, there are two cases right now where lawyers were preparing briefs for court. They used ChatGPT to generate text and provide citations to court cases. It happily did it. They were all wrong. Not only were they wrong, they were made up. The lawyer put this into court. The judge caught them. They got into big trouble because essentially they were lying to the court. So there is no current way to check this. In fact, I have talked to, I had a call with a working group of the American Bar Association, and we were talking about this, and they're trying to put out guidelines for how people should or should not be using these AI systems in this context. Did it work? Okay, yeah. So that's one answer to your question. So we just don't know. Yes?
Who owns ChatGPT? Who are the three leading providers of this service? And I'm a writer. If they use my content without my permission or paying me, are they not violating my rights?
Okay, so who owns ChatGPT? It's a company called OpenAI, which was in the news a lot a few months ago when they had this leadership semi-coup that did or did not happen. So that's the company. OpenAI has close tie-ins with Microsoft, and so a lot of the technology inside ChatGPT is used in things like Bing Search, which is Microsoft's search engine. Your question as a writer, There are, I think, 15 lawsuits right now pending against various companies involved in AI about copyright. Some of them involve text. The New York Times and I think the Wall Street Journal, if I'm not mistaken, have sued OpenAI and other companies. Pardon me? The Times, yes, because they are alleging that OpenAI has taken their copyrighted content and is then reproducing it, and they give examples of this, in a way that violates copyright. And they've taken your content, yeah. So there is no current protections for this because there is and I should say, as a computer scientist, there is a culture for many years in computer science where if you want to build machine learning models and you need data for it, you just go wherever you want, collect whatever you want, and then do it. No questions asked. So that culture has now run into issues of copyright because people are making serious money off of this. And like, why are writers? I mean, I was talking to our photographer who was saying that she's worried that her copyrighted material, the photograph she takes, could be absorbed by one of these systems and then used for their own purposes. So we will see how the lawsuits play out. In the US, that's how we often figure out these things. The Copyright Office is trying to put out its own guidelines on AI. They've been doing a whole process of hearings to sort of figure out what they should be doing. I don't have a good answer right now. It's kind of, it's a weird space. Lots of questions. Right there.
Thank you. That pertained to part of one of my questions. How do you get out of the data loop and repatriate your own personal information under your own private control? And also, since no one reads all the policy pages that you're required to check before you're allowed to use a program, is there some way a phrase or some way you can protect your privacy in those policies without having to read through all the policy and then not check it, not get to use the program?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to use that as an excuse to segue to the next portion of my presentation because it will answer this question as well as a bunch of other questions that people have been asking. So if you'll permit me, I'm going to go away from the demo and go back to the presentation. Okay, so I think the answer to this is probably yes. Cautiously, we should be somewhat worried. I did? Should we really worry? So, a few quick things, and I think you've already all picked up on this, so I feel like I don't need to spend too much time. You're aware of this. Systems using AI can discriminate because they can, if they pick up, they're driven by data. If the data has historical problems with it, as data tends to. If you want to, say, collect information on loans, and historically, Dale, as you were telling me yesterday, women did not get loans, and you have a bunch of data on people and who got loans or didn't, and there are no women in the data set, that system is going to reproduce that bias, and going to, whenever it sees a profile of someone who's a woman, we don't know, but might find a pattern that says, no, they shouldn't get any loans. So if you use historical data that has been biased in many ways to build these systems, they will reproduce that bias. They can actually just not work. A lot of these, and these are all case studies, that these are systems that have been built to give benefits, to remove fraud, to help students. They do not work as promised. There's a whole litany of papers, a litany of research showing now that AI systems that people put out there, like, oh, we're using AI, we'll use it for this, we'll save you money, it'll be work better. They just don't work. Forget about discrimination, they just don't work properly at all. They're not transparent. Again, someone asked about recourse. What happens if something happens and you need to appeal the decision? These systems are black box. No one knows how they work. Oftentimes, a government agency will buy software from a private entity. So even if you can petition the government, they'll say, well, it's a private company. They have trade secrets. We can't tell you how it works. And not that trade secrets aren't a bad thing. You do want to have protections for your IP. However, there is no way to understand how the systems work, why it worked, what explanation we might have for it. All of this is actually happening. And they deceive in many ways. I don't know if you heard about this thing. So this was in Utah, so I knew about it. So basically, a bunch of scammers generated fake a fake AI-driven voice of a student who was at a high school in Utah, sent it back to his parents in China saying that he's been kidnapped and asked for ransom money, sent a message from him that sounded like it was coming from someone he trusted saying, there's people out to kill you, you need to go hide in the forest. So when his parents tried to contact him, they couldn't because he wasn't there. They thought he was kidnapped, And the scammers got $80,000 from the parents before they let him go. They didn't know, before he was told he could go back to his home. No one was kidnapped, but they used AI scams, essentially an AI voice-driven technology to do this. And this has been happening over and over again, people getting scammed because of, before it used to be someone would just call you, now they're using voices of your loved ones to do this for you. If you're in public, if you've ever given a talk, if you're on YouTube, it's very easy to do this. It takes 30 seconds of audio to do this. There was a bunch of Russian hackers made a fake photo of the Pentagon, of the explosion of the Pentagon, and circulated it. This actually caused a real dip in the stock market because for a while, for at least 15, 20, 30 minutes, people thought that was real and there was an attack on the Pentagon. And so some people made a lot of money in this dip. You may have heard of this AI-generated robocall in New Hampshire during the primaries. There was a robocall basically telling people don't go out and vote in the Democratic primary for President Biden. There's no need to, you don't need to go vote. And it was caught relatively quickly, but most experts think this was a test case for some more of this is going to come in 2024 as we have a bunch of elections coming up. Another story, this is from Politico, basically an AI-generated audio of some, Democratic politician, again, the party doesn't matter, a politician in New York, seemingly saying horrible things about a colleague. Again, eventually it was proven to be fake, but it took a while, and there was definitely some political damage on the process. So these are some of the many reasons, including the ones you all mentioned, why we should be concerned. And I think the question is, what should we do about this, right? And that's why I wanted to get to this point, because there are lots of things happening to try and make sense and to manage and put protections in place so we can use AI without all these other horrific things happening. Some of these things I was involved with. So Dale mentioned the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. So when I went into the White House, there was no AI policy, very little of it. There had been some work in the previous administration, in the Trump administration. There had been some initial efforts to put out guidelines. And the goal was to build on that and sort of do more work putting in these protections based on everything we'd been seeing happening in the world. And so what we did was we basically put out a document called the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. It took about a year. I went there in May of 2021. In October, we started the work, and it took about a year for it to come out, which by government standards was impressively quick. This was a document that basically was signed off on by every agency in the US government. So we literally had meetings with representatives from every agency in the government, editing a document and sort of talking about it. And what does it have in it? I'm not going to make you read it. It's 70 pages long. But the summary is it has 5 rights, 5 principles that every automated system needs to adhere to. Number 1, these systems should be safe, they shouldn't hurt people, and they should be effective. They should actually work. If you're familiar with drug design, this term safe and effective is very important. A drug has to be safe, and then it has to be effective, and then you have to run a phase 3 trial and make sure it helps people, and only then it goes out in the market. Right? You can't just put a drug out in the market. We expect the same thing for technology that can impact people. It should be safe and effective. It shouldn't discriminate. We've talked about that. And we talked about data, right? We want to be protected from abusive data practices. We want agency over data use, which is a fancy way of saying we want control of our data. We don't want systems to just collect up all our data, snarf it all up, make predictions about us that we have no awareness of. We want a better set of policies for data protection. Other countries have this. Europe has this. The US does not yet anyway. And it's almost like a baseline foundation layer you need because AI uses so much data. We want to know when AI is being used. We don't want it to be invisible. And we want to know how it's being used, this idea of explanations. We have the right to say, look, why is the system making this decision about me? If you apply for credit and you get denied, there is a clause in the law, ECOA, from the 70s that says you have to be given an explanation for why you were denied credit. It's not a good one, but you have to be given some. So there's precedent for this. And we want this in these contexts as well. And finally, we want recourse. We want a way to get recourse to talk to an actual person, right? To dial 0 for an operator, to talk to someone when a system fails. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's very frustrating to me when I talk to one of these automated systems that doesn't pick up on my accent and I keep telling it things and it keeps trying to ask me more questions. I'm like, just get me a real person. We want that for technology as well. You have a question? That's my next slide. I'm coming in. Yep. Very good. So the question is, how do you implement this? That's literally my next slide. I'm going to talk to that. But these are the 5 principles, and they're not. I would say I ask you this. They're not unreasonable things. They're basic things we would like to have with technology that we have with other things in our lives. You know, we don't put cars out there without sort of testing them to make sure they work. We don't put drugs out there. We don't fly in planes that have not been tested rigorously before they're put out in the sky. And that's what this blueprint calls for. The same kind of care and attention to the technology we put out there that affects people in so many ways, going from your recommendations to decision making to these other systems. And the question is, well, how do we do all of this? So we put the blueprint out last year, and then I came back to Brown. And in the years since, the number of things have happened. And the most important thing that happened is this October, actually October 30th, a few months ago, the administration put out an executive order, which, if you don't know, an executive order is the most powerful thing the president can do on his own or her own without asking Congress to do anything about it, right? Because otherwise Congress has to pass laws. And so they put out this executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of AI, which has all those things that I mentioned in it, saying that every government agency, because an executive order targets the US government, every government agency that works with AI must build in their own protections and guidelines based on a bunch of things in this long, long document that includes stuff in the Bill of Rights to make sure that we're using AI responsibly and safely and securely. So you said it takes 100,000. It doesn't actually take that many people because the tools to do this, the software to do this, a lot of this is already out there. People just haven't wanted to put them into practice. That's possible. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how that's going to play out. Yeah. But in addition to the executive order itself, Congress is looking at writing a bunch of legislation. I was up at the Hill, giving testimony on various bills that they're looking at. And multiple states are putting out bills right now. I don't recall if there's bills in Florida, but in a number of states across the country, there are AI bills being written, pushed through committee, passed that have elements of these ideas of protections in them right now. So that's all happening sort of as we speak. It's been, this number is probably changed for 2024. I have a project we're working on at Brown at our center to sort of collect and evaluate all the different AI legislation that's out there. And then I think we have 588 bills in our database right now that are not, a very tiny fraction of them will pass, but they're all trying right now. And I'm going to stop there. I know I want to talk about this one. I'll talk about this next, but I just want to conclude with, one note about what's happening at. Right. Yes. Right. Yeah, so that's a good point. So what's happening at the company level is that a number of individual companies, so I can think of Microsoft, I can think of Salesforce, I can think of IBM, are putting out their own guidelines for how they want to use AI in a way that's safe, secure, and trustworthy. This is happening both at the level of individual big tech companies, but also at the level of conglomerates. There's sort of a software alliance, a couple of software alliances and others that are trying to think about what should be done for industries as a whole. There's a group, for example, that's building guidelines for all employment-related software systems. If you're going to use a software system to process resumes, to do interviews, then any software of that kind should look like something. And so there's a bunch of different sector-specific guidelines that are coming out. Some companies are putting this out on their own, and some companies are advocating for certain frameworks that they would recommend the government take up. So there's a dialogue is happening right now, right, on all sides of this. So I think of this as a multi-sector approach. There's the government pushing from one end, there are companies pushing their own standards from the other end, there's people in civil society pushing their own guidelines, there's the software developers and the researchers saying, hey, here are some new ideas for what you could be doing. Here are some new tools for building, say, explanations into machine learning so we can understand how they make decisions. And that's where some of the work I do come in, and that's that.
But in the Google example, the public, the may then change.
Right, so maybe I'll bring that example up, right? So what happened yesterday was that Google had put out a new tool, and I was going to show it if the Wi-Fi was working, had put out a new tool for generating images from text. So you give a text prompt, draw me a picture of the restaurant facing the Atlantic Ocean, and it'll draw a picture of a restaurant. And I'll say, well, make sure the restaurant is in Palm Beach. And then, okay, we'll put some palm trees up and make it look like it's in Palm Beach. Google had put out their own tool for this, and people were prompting that tool to generate, images, and it was generating images that people didn't like. So for example, someone, I think, again, the details are sketchy because I don't know exactly what the prompts were. One prompt was saying, give me representative images of the founding fathers. and the image generator, for some reason, decided to generate sort of alternative history images, where women were signing the Declaration of Independence. Of course, no, women did actually sign the Declaration of Independence at the time, and things like that. And a lot of people got very upset about whether Google was imposing its own values on the results that people wanted, and then they took it down. So that's what happened there. Sorry? I don't follow. It was many things. It was both women. They were showing black folks signing the Declaration of Independence. People said, look, they were slaves at the time. They weren't really signing it. Other people upset that they were showing black people dressed in sort of founding father costumes. There was a lot of controversy, and I find like with most of these controversies, there's a lot more heat than light about this. But nevertheless, to the point of what does this mean for how we should govern AI systems? This is an interesting case study of where I think perhaps it's not something that the government needs to be involved in, but that we all have to come to some understanding of what we expect and should not expect from these systems. Like I was telling you, a chatbot is not designed to be factual. It's designed to give you plausible answers that sound like they're coming from another person. This image search was doing that. If you're expecting a correct, an answer based on what you thought it was supposed to give you and you didn't, that may be a fault of the chatbot. Maybe it was something it wasn't designed to do. And that's a much longer discussion we have to have about what we expect of these systems, what we think they're giving us, what the companies are trying to convince us they can do for us, which is another thing. That's another story. I just want to conclude, and I'll take more questions here. Among the things that that we do when we think about this as technologists working in the space, a lot of us are now thinking we can't just build this technology and not worry about these issues. We have to think about how to build better, how we design technologies that do all the things we want, that find the patterns, that predict things that are useful to us, that are fun for us, but also acknowledge all these other issues that are coming up with data, with bias, with weird answers to questions that we didn't expect, and how to build better systems to do that. That's something that we're doing, that I think a lot of us are trying to do, that I'm trying to do at the center. Also teaching our students, right? I mean, we're going to teach a bunch of students to go out and be technologists to work at these companies, and they need to understand these issues. So just like I'm talking to you, I teach a class on this, and I teach students about this, and they're all like, we've never heard about this stuff. We just thought we were doing computer science. And I think it's important for them to pay attention. And then also advocate for, and not advocate, I would say sort of give guidance or give recommendations or just suggest what we know based on the technology and what it can and cannot do. Give guidance to policymakers and others to say, okay, look, you can't really legislate for this, so you can do it for that, and so on. I'll stop there. This is, we'll continue the conversation there. So thank you all for listening. Yes. There's a question in the back there.
I have a question for you. So this kind of reminds me of the Second Amendment laws in the fact that you're creating guidelines, rules, mandates, whatever, and people that follow the ethical life will follow those. But it leaves out that whole segment of hackers and career criminals, and we can't regulate how they're using AI. Right. So what, in your opinion, what is being done to kind of combat that? So that's a good question. So the question is basically, you could make all the laws you want, but people who are going to break the laws will break the laws anyway. I like to think of computer security as an analogy, as the right analogy here. In the world of computer security, virus protections, you install the virus protection software. No one is ever guaranteeing that you fix every possible hack in your system, but you make it harder and harder and harder and more difficult for the hackers to do what they have to do to break into your system. There's a lot of people, I can tell you, there's a lot of folks who genuinely want to build better AI systems that they can reap the benefits of without causing any problems, and they need guidelines and guidance for doing that. A lot of people from companies have said, well, we don't want to be the first one to take a hit by putting in these protections if no other company is going to do it. We want the government to set a level playing field so that we can have rules, literally rules for the road to do this. So I think that's one reason why the legislation is important, to set baseline rules for everyone to follow. And for those who are going to break the law anyway, there are now guidelines coming into place. For example, the FCC has put out a guideline on the use of deep fakes in elections and sort of criminalizing some of the, if someone is caught basically generating a deep fake of a politician, they're going to be prosecuted based on the authority that the FCC has. So there are things in place for those who are deliberate bad actors trying to do this, separately from guidelines and rules to create a level playing field, so those who want to can do a better job.
Yeah, we'll go there. I think there was a question in the back there first. Yeah. No, sorry. First, her. Then
Mine is sort of a follow-up. We're semi-protected from the dangers of nuclear war because it is so difficult to access the tools, the knowledge to actually create those weapons. Is it similar in AI where the resources necessary to develop it are within a few companies, and therefore if they can set up the controls, we're relatively safe? Or is it more open source, and so if you have someone who's smart, they could be creating it on their own?
So this is a big concern right now, and it's not just for nuclear weapons. There's, for example, concerns that AI can be used to design new molecules for chemical weapons or biological weapons. And the short answer is the knowledge is already out there. That ship has sailed. You're not going to pull back the knowledge. What people lack right now are resources, but only for chatbots that can talk to people intelligently. If you just want to build a system that can generate new drug candidates for a chemical weapon, you don't need much for that. I mean, I could probably do it on a laptop. So unlike with nuclear weapons, where the basic resource, the nuclear material, was heavily regulated and controlled, that is not the case here. And I think one big policy discussion, something I'm actually doing research on myself, is what are the kinds of policy interventions we need for systems where they've broken through all those choke points, if you wish, that we were using to regulate other kinds of systems. So again, I don't have the answer. We're trying to figure this out right now, literally. You had a question?
My understanding from something I read recently was that an AI search may take 6 or more times as much energy as a regular internet search. Given the potential impacts of that on the environment, on the economy, on energy markets, has there been any discussion of that?
So till recently, there has not been. People were ignoring this issue, but those who know have been pointing this out for a long time. There's actually a bill in the Senate that Senator Markey and I forget the co-sponsor proposed, called the AI Environmental Act, that will address precisely this issue of looking at the environmental cost and impact of training these large systems. It is a real problem. It is a problem that's only going to get worse as more and more systems come online, and we have to worry about this. I know you had a question, yeah. Yeah, right.
This would be a question on which you would have to judge the legitimacy of the question, the quality of the answer, and to what extent AI is capable of giving a profound answer. The question it would be, please comment on give us a psychological evaluation of the state of Donald Trump's mental health. What would happen if you put that in there, and how unethical would it be, and what are your thoughts on that question, and how it would be handled by AI?
One of the first, in the 1970s, one of the first AI systems that was proposed, called ELIZA, was designed to be a therapist. Weizenbaum, the person who developed the system, designed it merely to reflect back what people were saying. So when you ask me the question, I would say, so why are you worried about the psychological health of Donald Trump? And I would just keep reflecting back your questions back at you. And people thought that was the best therapist ever in the 1970s. The use of AI for therapy has been around for a long time. People are proposing using chatbots right now. I'm not a psychological expert. I'm not a therapist. I would be very concerned about the reliability of these systems. I have no idea. I have no idea. We can try on a chatbot later and check it out. Yeah. Yeah, putting in there. Yeah. I'm not going to put in mine because it'll remember me. I don't want it to know I asked the question, so I'm not going to do it. Yes, there's a question back there. Yes. Debbie? Sorry. Sorry to make you run.
In the government, who has responsibility for regulating or drawing up these rules and regulations for controlling and making sure that AI is ethical and not damaging? And two, is the government itself working to build its own AI capability?
Right. So the first question, the answer is tricky because AI distributes across so many different sectors. The government is not organized to have a single entity. The executive order I mentioned actually calls for the construction, which they've just had, of an AI officer council inside the White House, which consists of representatives from every agency who is thinking about AI. So that's the most highest level authority right now in the US government, that AI council. And so every agency has to come up with their own guidelines, but they're going to try and coordinate at the White House level to make sure they're doing things consistently. I forgot your second question. Yes, and the US government does build its own AI systems, but most of what the US government does with AI is purchases from outside vendors. So in fact, one of the guidelines to US government authorities is when you buy AI from a vendor, make sure that you've checked for all these things that we think you should be worried about. Make sure it's tested, it's evaluated, there's transparency issues, what data is being used, and so on. But it also, the executive order also applies to internal government use of AI as well. So it's like we should set the example if we're going to tell other people what to do.
I'm going to say if you would like to talk to him privately, you can, but we're going to cut this off now. Yeah. So people can go home.
Thank you very much.